All right. Hello, friends, and welcome to this episode where we're going to talk about how to overcome intrusive thoughts. And this is really going to start a series that I'm going to do just on intrusive thoughts. So, in this episode specifically, I wanted to talk about, what are intrusive thoughts? How do we define them? And, how do we kind of decipher, quote, intrusive thoughts? So, I just want to talk about the concept as like from a high level today. And then as we move forward in this series, I'm going to dive deeper into, you know, the various techniques when it comes to overcoming intrusive thoughts and so on and so forth. So, and then I'm also going to talk about different types of intrusive thoughts and all that, and go into specifics. So, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Matt Cotty, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker and the founder of Restored Minds. And real quick, before we dive into this episode, I really would appreciate your support for the show by liking and subscribing, as well as even leaving a comment. And if you really want to go above and beyond, please leave us a review on iTunes, hopefully a positive one. And because all that stuff just really helps our show. So, and if you're looking for help with intrusive thoughts, and if you're looking for help with this stuff, whether it's OCD, anxiety, really anything on the stress spectrum, I have some resources right down in the notes, being a free guide that you can start with, as well as a 2-day workshop that we put together. And there's also additional resources over at restoredminds.com. So let's dive in. Intrusive thoughts. So this topic obviously really hits home personally, because this was my experience with OCD and anxiety. This was what really kind of spiraled me out when I was about 18, 19. And I just kind of had a lot of stressors going on in my life. I just started college and didn't know what I was going to do, as I just felt lost. And that's when kind of the intrusive thoughts started just invading and bombarding my mind. And what happened is that I started doing, a bunch of behaviors to fight off the thoughts and the anxiety that was being produced. And it seemed logical to me, right? Seemed totally logical. Unfortunately, what happened is that the more and more of the behaviors that I did, and these could have been, all sorts of things, obviously physical behaviors like avoiding things that triggered me, checking, getting reassurance, coping, trying to numb out the anxiety, you name it, I probably tried it. And then from there, going into all the mental behaviors, right? These were primarily the things that I engaged in. So, when you, all the things like mental rumination, analyzing, silent prayer, counting, distracting myself, trying to, drown out the thoughts, whether it's like by playing music or listening or trying to distract myself and always engage in something, right? These are all examples of behaviors that I engaged in. So, the problem with engaging in these behaviors, right, as we're going to go on this series and learn, is that as you engage in behaviors and you effectively either push the thought away or you calm down the nervous system temporarily, what that does is that reinforces the idea to your brain that, hey, these thoughts are really dangerous and that these are something that we should take seriously. So your brain produces more of them. And then as that happens, you have more thoughts, so you do more behaviors, your nervous system keeps going up and up and up, and it actually kind of works as this like, kind of downward spiral, and that produces more and more stress in the body. So when we're talking about intrusive thoughts, what we got to understand is that they can take on so many variations. And one of the worst things you can do is start to think that specific intrusive thoughts or the content of the intrusive thought is the problem that you're dealing with. And that was where I went, right? The content of what my mind was saying, like, what if X, Y, and Z, right? So that X, Y, and Z, whether it's what if I hurt someone, what if I accidentally, jump off this bridge? What if I what if I get possessed? What if I go to hell? what if, like, and they can go into anything. They can literally go into anything. And these intrusive thoughts that kind of just invade your mind, right? I mean, the thing is if you've never experienced it, they have this feeling that they're very real, right? And this is so how I try to explain this to people is this idea of being in the lens. So when you have high levels of stress and cortisol in your body, it really does distort your perception of the world, right? And as you are trying to, and with these high levels of stress, that's what actually is producing a lot of these thoughts. So when we're talking about what are intrusive thoughts, there are these thoughts that invade your mind, right? They just bombard you. And then what happens is that as they start to bombard you, it spikes up more anxiety, right? So your nervous system is just like, again, it's rising and rising, and you feel it in your body. And the false assumption that most people make is that because my body reacted to the thought, it means that the thought must be valid. That's the biggest misconception that people dive into, or that people buy into, I should say. And as the thoughts start coming in, you start to have more stress in the body. It produces more thoughts. And as you try to neutralize the thoughts or feelings in your body with these compulsions or safety behaviors that push it down temporarily, it kind of just masks the problem. And then the energy is just always there. And this is what can lead to the thoughts literally starting the moment you wake up and going all day and until you go to sleep. And even then, you might wake up throughout the night, you might have dreams about the thoughts, all that stuff. So when we're talking about intrusive thoughts, I did not ever I did not ever realize that I was dealing with OCD or stress or anxiety. Like, I knew I had anxiety, you know what I mean? I knew I was dealing with OCD, and I knew I was dealing with like stress in the body, but I never in a million years thought of OCD when I was experiencing this, and most people don't. But this is a very common symptom of OCD or high levels of stress, and that's all it is a symptom, right? It's like, and this is why we never try to treat the symptom of something. So the symptom is just telling us a story, right? And we really want to look at the cause. And the cause is just, and again, an excess amount of stress in the body. That's what's really causing, an excess buildup of emotion is causing these thoughts to just manifest in the mind. And so this is why, if you're dealing with intrusive thoughts, and I'm going to kind of just loosely define it on my own terms, just kind of off the hip here. When we're talking about intrusive thoughts, we're talking about, generally speaking, future-based or past-based, what if or possibilities or obsessions, and that trigger up a lot of anxiety. Okay. And they can take on so many different themes that I'm not going to go into the different themes today. I mean, I will say that intrusive thoughts in them of themselves tend to fall into three categories. They tend to be in the kind of harmful or violent categories, sexual categories, or religious or existential. And even the sexual categories, it would even add in a subcategory of one's relationship, right? And the mind kind of locks into a specific idea, and then it just bombards and bombards and bombards and bombards. And the mind thinks it's keeping you safe, is the paradox with intrusive thoughts. It thinks by coming up with these intrusive thoughts and trying to prevent this terrible, what you perceive to be a terrible outcome, that is actually, again, keeping you safe. And because when you engage in behavior, it calms the anxiety down. So the mind's like, oh, well, that did a good job keeping us safe, right? And then therefore it produces a thought again. And then the more you do the behavior, the more it produces thoughts. And then and then the tricky part with the behaviors is you have to do more of the behaviors to get the same level of relief. And then so you spend your whole day doing these behaviors. And anyone caught in this loop, or have you ever been caught in this loop? I mean, it is overwhelming, to say minimally, right? And it's very difficult to understand because when you go and we'll get into, as we go in this series here, we'll go into like, the common missteps and what a lot of people try, and why it doesn't work and all that stuff. But I mean, one of the big things to stress with intrusive thoughts is that it's not a content problem. And that, man, like if someone had come back, if I could go back in time and tell myself something at some point in my life, right? I mean, there would probably be a couple other things, but one of the things I would make a stop at is the moment that this really onset in my life when, if I had, that Back to the Future car, I don't even know, the DeLorean, right? If I could go back in time, sure, there might be a couple of stops I would make, but one of the things that I would have done was to really tell myself when I was struggling that it's not a content problem, that the content of the thought is not the problem that I'm experiencing, because that is the number one thing that spirals people out, as they get caught on what the mind is saying and trying to figure that out, trying to solve that, assuming that that is the thing that needs to be resolved. And paradoxically, that is the exact thing that drives them down the hole. And if you're there, I mean, I just want to let you know, like, I've been there. Good news is you can get out. Good news is that you can get out. And on this series here, we're gonna talk about that, right? And we're really gonna dive into again, the common missteps, most of the types of intrusive thoughts that people have, and really what you need to do to start reversing this loop, breaking the loop and starting to again climb back out and really getting your body back to a homeostatic state, and all the things that go with that. So in this episode, again, I just wanted to really talk about what they are, right? And there are these thoughts that are just invading our mind, and they cause a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of guilt, a lot of doubt, a lot of internal suffering. And what causes them is an excess amount of stress in the body. That's why your body is producing. That's why these thoughts are producing initially. Is just this, like, whether it's anxiety, stress, all that stuff. That's why normally when people wrestle with intrusive thoughts, you'll find that they tend to start to surface during stressful periods of life. And so that's all I want to talk about in this episode. And then as we continue on in this series, again, we're going to go deeper into just certain questions. But I just wanted to start saying, hey, what are intrusive thoughts? Well, there are these doubtful thoughts that latch onto a certain topic that usually is very important to you. And again, they feel real. They trigger up a bunch of feelings, very intense, and they can really cause you to spiral. And as you spiral with doing these behaviors, that can lead to feelings of depression, feelings of hopelessness, and all that stuff. And like I said, the number one thing that I want you to take away from this video is not just what they are, but the idea that you actually can break out of this and you can recover. Okay. And so as we go on this series of overcoming intrusive thoughts, that's what we're going to talk about as we move forward. So thank you for taking the time to hang out today. And I just wanted to kind of share a little bit about that. And then in the next episode, we're going to dive into some more practical stuff when it comes to really breaking free from this. So wish you guys a great week as always, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Take care. Thank you so much for watching that video. And so if you're struggling with OCD and anxiety, I just wanted to let you know that we have a free training for you over at Restored Minds, where you can start learning how to use our AAA response to really break out of that loop and ultimately take back control of your life. And all you need to do to access is just click the little link below and you'll be taken to a page where you can register today. Thank you so much.